Howdy again, everybody. This is Doc with ThoroFan, and one of the more interesting things that happens in the racing world every year is what's known as the Global Racing Symposium. It's a great event that's put on by the University of Arizona's Racetrack Industry Program that brings together all of the stakeholders in the industry to talk about and present on topics that are very relevant in the racing industry and sport today. And it can really vary. It can be things from regulatory issues to welfare issues to wagering issues. Really, the topics are open and endless to potentially present and talk to people via roundtable formats on these topics. And it's something I had a chance to go to a couple of years ago. It was really informative for me. Fortunately, they've made it where it can now be live streamed for a fee as well. So I was able to catch the last couple of years via live stream. And one of the real interesting things I think that we get a chance to see also at these symposiums is what I kind of like to call the next generation of racing, and the next generation of potential racing executives or racing trainers, racing people, just anybody who really loves this game. And that's through something called capstone projects. And this is something that every senior student has to complete as part of their experience and education at the Racetrack Industry Program. And one of the ones that was presented this year really kind of struck my interest, and it was done by a young man named Eric DeCoster. He's a recent graduate now. He is down working in the Oaklawn Racing office, and his project looked at surveying almost everybody in the racing industry, fans and handicappers included, about the claiming game and condition books and kind of the way those are written and structured. And could there be a way that we could improve that system to improve the overall racing product, kind of give everybody what they want when it comes to that? And he found some really interesting results based on who he talked to. And this has kind of laid a little bit of the groundwork for what we may see as the next steps evolving in this process. Now, you may remember that a couple of years ago at the Jockey Club Roundtable, Sal Sinatra put on a great presentation about wanting to the North America, or at least the U.S., to do away with the claiming system and kind of go more to a handicap system that is used over in Europe. And Eric did look at that and tried to think of a way maybe that he could blend the two systems to make things better. We had a chance to sit down with Eric for an interview a couple of days ago, and it was really interesting, some of the data and research results that he found, as well as how this has kind of spurred a little bit more development in this area and kind of what the next steps are. So we're going to show that to you now. I do apologize ahead of time. I had to go to a different type of camera setup for this Zoom interview, and the lighting was not great, so I realize it makes me look like a potential FBI informant that's confidential or something, but that doesn't really matter because the important stuff is what Eric has to say anyway. And we were also able to sneak in a couple of questions that we like to ask everybody, especially what he feels is the most important thing for fans going forward and how to attract new fans to the sport, as well as getting his Derby horse for 2024. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we discuss with Eric DeCoster all about the claiming game and the condition book. We are here with Eric, is it DeCoster? Am I saying that right?
DeCoster, yep.
Okay, great. Here, talking a little bit about kind of the capstone project that he had done. He's a senior now, right, at the University of Arizona?
Yeah, I just graduated.
Well,
December.
congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
So a recent graduate of the University of Arizona Racetrack Industry Program, which is a great program that's been around for many years out in Arizona, kind of grooming some of the best up and comers for the industry. And so I guess first, how did you kind of get involved in racing and become a fan and all of that?
Yeah, so I've been a racing fan my entire life. But it's funny, I don't have any family that's racing fans or even family friends. My dad just needed something to do with me and my younger sister. So Prairie Meadows, where I grew up in the Des Moines area, they held this thing every Saturday morning, donuts and workouts or something. And so he just took us to keep us busy, basically. But I fell in love with it and just been a fan ever since, and knew I wanted to work in the industry. So that's why I went to Arizona. But yeah, I've been a diehard racing fan since before I can remember, really.
That's great. Did your dad and sister sort of become fans as a result of doing that, or was it just kind of you?
Just me, just me. I was the one who kept going back to my dad, and then my mom too, once she learned what my dad was doing with us. I just constantly be going back. Can we go back? Can we go to the races? And I even found out about the racetrack industry program through an ad in a Prairie Meadows racing program one night
Oh,
uh, when I was like 8 years old. And so I knew from when I was 8 years old, I was going to go to Tucson and go to the RTIP.
oh, that's great. And so, as part of the RTIP, I believe it's a requirement of all seniors. They have to kind of do what's called a capstone project, where they pick kind of a topic that's in the industry and research it. And from seeing some of these presentations over the years, the topics really vary widely depending on what kind of the area of interest the student is in. And I had seen yours when I was watching the recent Raising Symposium, and it was a really, really interesting topic because I think it's something that is kind of on the forefront of a lot of racing thoughts right now in ways to potentially change racing a little bit or make things a little bit easier as far as entries and stuff like that. So if you want to just talk a little bit about kind of what your project was and where you kind of got the interest in it.
Yeah. So my interest started in it. I kind of transitioned about halfway through my time in Tucson at the University of Arizona to wanting to be more front side centric. I thought I wanted to work with hands on with horses heading into it, but I got swayed a little bit. And so, I naturally have always wanted to improve things in horse racing, like I think so many of us young people want to do. And I thought claiming races were something that felt like a tangible, real thing that we could start to work towards and try and improve because there's a pretty heavy negative stigma around them because they lead to higher breakdown rates. And while some might say it can be inclusive to the new owner, it's also should be recognized that it hurts the smaller barns because their lesser quality horses can get taken right from them, and then they don't have a source of income. So it initially started there, and then it just blossomed into this search into ratings that we see very commonly in basically every other jurisdiction, but us here in the U.S. and Canada, so basically North America. And so yeah, the project kind of grew from there, I should say, and worked with a lot of people from overseas and racing officials here and got feedback through them from a survey that got over 500 responses, and it was just learned a lot about not only ratings and claiming races, but just how people feel about racing and in general.
Oh, that's really good. And you do bring up a good point because really kind of North America is I mean, we're isolated in a lot of things when you think about it when it comes to racing, but especially on the claiming ranks and people potentially proposing having almost more like a handicap system like they have over in Europe and stuff like that. So what were, I know you sent surveys out. Was it mostly just to trainers or was it to kind of like a swath of the industry?
It was everybody. I wanted to hear from the bettors and the fans. I wanted to hear, do you like playing claiming races, or does the race just need to be competitive and you don't care about the level of it? Would handicap ratings make it easier to you? And then I talked to trainers. Uh, is this something that you think would make your lives easier, rather than trying to figure out if this horse has all these different conditions? Because you could have won a million different races but still be eligible for certain conditions based off the money you earned, right? It's complex, it's convoluted. And yeah, I even asked racing officials, is your system working? And it was a resounding no from all facets. Actually, the people who were most positive were the fans and the bettors because they said, we really don't care what you put out there. We just want it to be competitive and playable. I think the claim game and claimers in general do play into their hands really well. So from there, it was kind of researching what would be the best way to make our races more competitive. I haven't even talked about the fact that claiming races are associated with higher breakdown rates, and that's often because horses have been found to be more susceptible to breakdowns within their first few starts after being claimed, their first or second start. And then it slowly trails off. But that it makes sense that constant movement of horses, different programs, different regimes. It can be confusing to a horse's body, and it'd just be like a person doing 10 different workout regimens within a 5-month span. It'd be your body wouldn't know how to react. So the higher breakdown rates, the competitive races, and just making everyone's lives a little easier. And ratings is really where that popped up and kind of filled the void. And I kind of worked around it and do want in my project, I incorporated a claiming element because it's not something you can just completely wipe off the face of the earth, in my opinion, because it is ingrained in our culture, and it does have positives to it, but it does need to be modified in many ways.
So when you kind of dug a little bit deeper and talked to some of the racing officials and trainers and things, were they kind of suggesting a change to the condition book? I mean, I know one of the things that stuck out at me years ago at when EquestriaCon was still around and they were doing one of the panels with the trainers, Mark Casse kind of made an interesting comment. He said, with the way the condition books are written nowadays, I maybe start 1,000 races, but in order to start those 1,000 races, I have to do 5,000 entries because so many races don't go that are in the condition book. So did they feel that kind of shrinking down some of the conditions would be a betterment to things? Or
yeah, I think I've always believed, even before I researched this, that we offer too many races, and that this kind of dives into a whole nother facet, but just in general, the attention span of the modern consumer has dropped drastically. So why are we still having 14 race cards where your first race is at noon and your last race is at 6:30? I mean, that's an entire day. People don't have the time to tune into that. So you start with that, and then you realize, yeah, I mean, these people can't get in as many races as they'd like to, especially the more your horse wins. Why are we making it tougher for a horse who has now won 3 or 4 races in a row to race? Don't we want to see those horses more because we know they can be competitive? Instead, you have 100 maidens and 100 non-winners of 2 lifetime or non-winners of 1 other than conditioned horses, and then they just lose opportunities and run out of condition. I've worked in racing offices, and I just get so frustrated every time I hear the words "run out of conditions," because we have to be able to help these people run if they want to run their horses. So there was definitely a lot of feedback that said we need to modify it because we need to give more horses opportunities and not have that situation you mentioned. Is trainers shouldn't have to enter 5 times the amount of horses to run in 20% of the races. So
no, that's really interesting. Did you find, I'm curious because I know this was also brought up in a Jockey Club roundtable a couple of years ago by Sal Sinatra. Was there any kind of positive reaction to doing away with the claiming and going to kind of like a handicap system? Or were even the horsemen saying, this is just kind of the way we operate and we're used to it, and it would make things really difficult to try to make that change?
it was very mixed because every trainer is slightly different. You have the guys who will claim 2-3 horses a day if they can, especially at some of the prestigious meets like Oaklawn, for instance. Very busy at the claim box. Saratoga, extremely busy at the claim box. They want their horses. Then you have the people on the opposite end, especially like your state bred programs, the people who really support owners, breeders, trainers who really support the state bred programs, where it's we put so much and we've invested so much into this horse trying to support our program and do it on a regional basis. And then if they're not up to the standard of a maiden special weight horse or higher, then I have to risk losing them. That doesn't feel fair to me. So you have the people who are trying to be opportunistic through the claim game, and you don't want to take that away from them. You also have the people who shouldn't have to lose their livelihoods basically because their horse isn't as good as the system says it is. We need to still give them opportunities, even if their horse isn't good, to be competitive and for them to hang on to them. So that's why, like I mentioned a little earlier, I tried to develop a system that provides a balance where you can't get rid of it, but at least control it to a greater effect.
Okay. And it kind of, you went into a little bit more. Was there any other detail you kind of want to share about the system that you had kind of created or thought of and stuff like that, and how exactly it would work kind of in the real world type of scenario to track?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try my best to convey it. I won't say it's complex, but it's definitely a visual thing, but I'll do my best. Basically, a rating system, right? It's the quality of the horse based at that point in time. So the dream would be, and this has been something I discussed with a lot of people through this, was like automating this system as much as we can.
Mhm.
because we have a lot of horses here, and places like Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, wherever, they are they have created ways in which it's easier for them to do it all. And in Australia, they have a ton of horses, for instance, but they do it on a very regional basis and it all works together. Here, we're too big and too disconnected to make that happen. So it would have to be an automated system and the human element would have to be removed. So we have a lot of ways to do that too, right? We have a million different speed figures, a million different ways to measure how good a horse is in a race and in their career. So point being, that'd be the first step. And then pretty easy from there to bracket the races and figure out your groupings track by track. But then the biggest element would be, how do you incorporate the claiming? So what the British Horse Racing Authority trialed, this isn't something they still do because things came up during COVID in terms of funding and they weren't able to continue it. But they ran a trial system where the rating their horse was given would correlate to their age. And they developed a table with that using data from the sales companies and other claiming races they ran, even though they don't run many claiming races, they have very few. But point being, they ran the system. So your claiming price correlated to your rating and your age on that table that was developed. So if you're a 85 rated horse, that's what the number says you are, and you're a 5-year-old or something like that, then you're going to run for a $70,000 claiming price. And let's say you win that race and you move up 3 or 4 points on your rating because that was a good performance. You're an 89 and you're still a 5-year-old. Well, then you'll just go a few pegs down that table and you're going to be in for an $85,000 claiming tag your next race. So it all shifts based off of your performance rather than what the trainer thinks. And it avoids those trainers playing the claim game and claiming a horse for really cheap and running them back at the same price and winning the race, getting the horse claimed. You make a profit, great, good for you, but how good is that for the horse? And so it's just trying to limit their movement. And while they said at the BHA that it didn't work, they said it wasn't because it can't work. It's just they don't have an established claiming culture. And obviously we have a pretty
Yeah.
big one here. So it's something that we could play into kind of well, in my opinion. And the feedback I got from the folks over there trying to incorporate it here, the few people I talked to here, they said, yeah, it'd be very doable, and it's simple math, really. To do these things, it's not like it would cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and be rocket science.
So is this something that you think you could see trialed, say, like on a mid-Atlantic circuit or something like that, where I just know from being in Pennsylvania and following kind of the way that the tracks operate, they are sort of trying to form a compact of sorts to, get kind of equal on many things. HISA sort of overtook some of that, but
Yeah.
on the other end, there is some talk of, collaboration between Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, things like that. So would it be there, or do you think it would be better to try to trial something just in an individual state, like say with their state bred ranks or something like that?
I believe that both could work, but I do believe the best way to sell it would be through the state bred ranks, because, like I said, these are people who want to hang on to their horses. So why not try and competitively group them? And we know that certain state bred programs, any horse can win at any given time. So let's find a way to group them competitively and then see if we can create consistent form and type those types of things with those horses. But it absolutely could work. And in terms of the uniformity, that's where a place like a region like the Mid-Atlantic, I should say, would be so helpful to show that, hey, these ratings are transferable and they work in multiple places, and this process could be doable.
So I guess, then looking, you found this, you've gotten obviously a lot of feedback, positive and negative, and it sounds more like people are interested in it. So what's kind of the next step? Like, has anybody kind of jumped on and say, hey, I want to talk to you more about maybe trialing this, or is it still kind of in you're trying to sell it to somebody to try phase?
I can't say too much, but I know
That's
there
okay.
are people working on developing ratings, automating ratings, and hoping to roll them out within the next year or two. The only reason I can't say much is because they're still working on it themselves, right? They're trying to get tracks on board. But there is an internal push from racing officials to go this direction. A lot of the racing officials I talked to, whether that was at the symposium or through my survey, they all said this is something we've thought about. Just no one's interested. And then I came back at them a little like, well, that's just not true, because all these trainers said they'd like to see if it worked and they'd be interested in it. And at the end of the day, they just want to race their horse. I think that's really important for us to realize. Michael Dickinson, the famed trainer who spent plenty of time across the Atlantic and plenty of time over here, he said, I don't care. I just want to race my horse. Okay. So if that's the way they have to do it, that's the way they have to do it. And if you're giving the claiming trainers the option to still buy horses, wonderful. They'll be happy enough, right? There'll be some disgruntled ones, but then you'll also be protecting the little guy who wants to race their horse without the fear of losing it, especially if their horse gets good, because it's very easy to not claim a bad horse. But if that little guy has a really good horse who might only be able to win up to a certain claiming level, then you should still be able to hang on to that horse.
Oh no, absolutely. And so kind of then, it almost kind of sounds like it's almost like somebody just has to kind of take the leap and do it and wait for, and that's, I mean, that's almost racing to a T for the last, 20, 30 years. You kind of definitely moving forward in that direction. So it is a really, really interesting concept. I guess one of the last questions I had with it was, one of the things we talk about in racing is obviously lack of number of starters per race and what seems to be like horses starting less. Now that's usually more of a case in the upper level, allowance stake horses. We see that more, and the claiming ranks, we see them running fairly frequently. But as far as like field numbers and field size and stuff like that, were a lot of trainers saying they, under this type of system, it would allow them to run their horses more, provided it was safe and all of that. You don't want to run a horse that shouldn't be, but allow them to get more starts into their horse because the conditions would favor them, being able to run them instead of looking for that perfect condition they need. Yeah,
it would force their hand. It's also important to realize most trainers don't want to run in big fields. It's not the back and forth between our racetrack and their management and the trainers. There's going to be some who hunt the condition and they're like, if my horse is a second level allowance horse, then that's what they are, and we're going to enter that horse every time that comes up in the book. But then you're going to have the ones who try to get crafty and they say, I don't care what my purse is, I don't care what I'm running for, I just want to win races. So if that's that spot, then that's that spot. So in terms of field size and running the horses more, I think it would kind of have to force their hand, because there would be less opportunities to run your horse. You might fit one or two brackets in terms of, once again, example of an 85 rated horse, 75 to 90 or 80 to 95 or 85 to 100, right? So you get basically 3-4 options. So yeah, you could kind of pick and choose your spots there, but it would change how regularly you'd have to run your horse, other than them just sitting there and your owner paying bills basically on them, and he's the trainer coming back with, hey, we just have to wait for this perfect spot. There really wouldn't be a perfect spot anymore, which that's a good thing. That creates competitive races.
No, and you bring up a good point. I mean, it is that kind of that constant battle of the handicappers wanting large fields, and obviously the trainers and the owners, they don't, because less horses means more chance to collect purse money and various spots and stuff. So yeah, no, that's a really good point too. So I mean, it's a really interesting idea, and I hope that you guys do get a lot more traction with it, because I'm excited to see what definitely could potentially come of it. And I know you said you had recently graduated. Will we be seeing you at a specific track? Have you been able to line up a job so far and work on this?
So I've actually been at Oaklawn here for a few weeks.
Oh wow, great.
Yeah, so it is a little funny, and I do with my bosses about how claiming is such a big part of what we do, and here I am. But I think it's good to note that a track like Oaklawn and a lot of the tracks I talk to, they're open to new ideas, right? It's the execution and the other parts, stuff, that the logistics all has to be considered. I want people to be encouraged that the fresh ideas are being welcomed. It's just about the implementation. But like I said, I am on confident ground saying that there is movement in this realm, and Whether it happens or not, no one can say.
Yeah.
But it's encouraging to me, and I hope to other people that there could be positive shifts in terms of race conditions and the product we're putting out on the track, hopefully sooner than later.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And so, kind of before I let you go, just a couple of other questions that are kind of general. So, obviously you're of the younger generation kind of coming up now into racing. How do you feel racing is going to be maybe in 5 or 10 years from now? Do you see kind of like positive change or negative change? I know a lot is in flux right now, but we're always interested in getting the opinion of people that, obviously see this industry are really, and sport, and are really excited to be part of it. And hopefully can sustain things, obviously for the future generation. So Oaklawn obviously is a great place, for you to get a ton of experience, and also just it's just a great racing environment. But how do you see the racing in general faring over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, right? I think we've seen that over the last 2 years alone. You're going to have your really down periods, right? We saw that in 2019. We saw that last year. But then you're going to have some really positive experiences, and horses that we fall in love with and really enjoy, and tracks doing things that are positive. So this is a period of growth, and it might not be from a economic perspective. It might not be from the outside perspective, but I think for racing, I am a proponent of HISA because I believe that the science is a welcome addition to what our industry, because our industry needs more data, it needs more innovation, and they're leading the way on that. So for anything, whether you disagree with their policies or not, they are being innovative, and the more innovators we have in this industry, the better off we're going to be. So I think there's also going to be a massive shift in who's running everything, right? I think the generation that's been in charge for 20, 30 years, in most tracks you go to, the management is not young.
Yep.
And it's not a bad thing, but the ideas of the 80s and 90s and even 2000s don't apply to what we're doing today. And so the more younger people, the more people who understand the challenges we're facing that get into those positions of power just out of, for time's sake, it's not like they're forcing them up, but because of time, the better off we'll be. So it's not going to be easy, like I said, but I'm encouraged.
And if you had to pick, and I know it's hard to pick just one thing, but one of the things we also talk a lot about is attracting that younger generation to racing and making them become fans and handicappers. If there's one thing you think like the sport or the industry could do to really attract them and grasp hold and make them, like us, really passionate fans, what would that be?
We got to make it a party. And I hate parties, but I say it because I love using this example when I talk to people not in the industry, friends, family, whatever, about everyone knows, right? Racing's not very popular anymore with the public eye. What do we need to do? What can you do? And I always think back to, I interned with the New York Racing Association, not this past summer, but the summer of 2022. And it was just a very casual Thursday at Belmont, middle of June, Thursday evening. They do evening cards, kind of a little later post times. And I was just, we kind of finished up work for the day, and I kind of went and wandered for a little bit. And it's like, man, this track apron's pretty dead. There's not really many people here. Then I look up at the top of the stretch, and it is so many people. And it's because they have this little area set up where it's just grills and like picnic tables, and you're allowed to bring in your own drinks and all these things, and everyone's having a great time. And then I'm like, why isn't the entire track apron looking like this? Why don't we have these everywhere? Like, turn it into a party. The thing about, every generation's this way, but when I think about my generation, people like community, people like going to do things, and they might not be there necessarily for what's happening, but they like going to do things together. So the more you can foster an environment of community and having a good time and kicking back. I mean, if they're not paying attention to the races, they're not paying attention to the races, but at least it's there. At least you might be creating some new fans by putting your presence. It's no different really than the backyard or whatever they call it at Saratoga. But everyone's just hanging out, having a good time. They might not see a horse all day, but they're at the track. They're enjoying it. They're patrons. So the more that we can make it a party and an event, not, doesn't need to be blasting music, but just getting people together to hang out. at the racetrack. It's going to be more so than just, we all love the sport, right? But we also know that not everyone else loves the sport. But at least put it in front of their eyes and kind of keep it in the back of their head.
Oh, that's great. And final question. I know it's kind of early, but do you have your eyes on a particular Derby horse at this point that you're following, or?
I am in love with Locked,
Hmm.
Todd Pletcher's colt. I didn't think he could lose the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he kind of beat up on himself. But I love the way he finished off. I was probably Gun Runner's biggest fan when he was on the track. So obviously, I root for every offspring of Gun Runner too. So Locked for sure is if he can stay healthy. I once again, I don't think he can lose the Derby, but I said that about the Juvenile, and here we are. So.
Yep, it's usually not the best, but the luckiest horse that ends up winning the Derby a lot of times. So
Exactly.
no, but thank you again, Eric, for taking some time with us here on ThoroFan and sharing your project. Like I said, it's really interesting, and we're really excited to kind of follow to see how it goes. And best of luck to you down at Oaklawn, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you and all the great things you guys are coming up with in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
You too.
All right, so a lot of really interesting information there, a lot packed into it, and kind of as Eric alluded to, there's a lot to still digest and dissect out of this and try to figure out a way to make a lot of these suggestions practical in the real racing world, which is kind of always the challenge. The ideas are great, the theory behind everything is really nice, but sometimes trying to implement these things in the real world is not as easy as it might appear on paper. But the good news is it does sound like he has made some headway, which is amazing. With some groups that may be interested in trying to create this type of system. I was especially interested to hear and see that what he's kind of proposing is an automated handicap type system where you don't have kind of the human element in there to have any kind of bias potentially towards some horses or some trainers or things like that when you're doing these handicap ratings. At least that's the way what I kind of took out of it. This might be an area where artificial intelligence certainly is explored a little bit more in the racing game. So hope everybody enjoyed it. Hope everybody's enjoying this kind of ramp up as we get set more and more for Derby season. We're starting to trot along a little bit. More of the races will be picking up. Hope everybody enjoyed the Pegasus World Cup card that just concluded this past weekend. Congratulations to all the big winners there. And as always, if you are looking for the most up-to-date and accurate information about this great sport of thoroughbred horse racing made for you, the fan, by us, the fans, there's only one place you need to turn, and that's right here at ThoroFan.